Welcome to the Flourish Frequency, the show where we activate and amplify the frequencies of success, joy, and abundance. I'm your host, Beth Larsen, a high-performance and quantum success coach. If you're ready to ditch the hard hustle and embrace a more effortless flow, then this is the show for you. Together, we'll tap into quantum thinking, harness the laws of the universe, and unlock the secrets to living a life of more. More joy, more energy, more passion, more money, and more meaning. No more simply surviving, we're going beyond thriving. It's time to flourish. The Flourish Frequency Show starts now. Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Frequency. I am your host, Beth Larsen, and today we are diving into a theme that I believe is one of the most powerful keys to flourishing: paradox as a portal for your power. So the nature of paradox itself is that it's seemingly opposites. And when we're taught that we have to choose sides, to fight what we don't want, to fix what feels bad, and to live in either or, when we do this, we make paradox a problem, when in actuality, it is a portal for power. In this episode, I am joined by my friend and mentor, Dr. Pat, the founder of the Transformation Network. And together we're going to explore how resistance creates power leaks, how tension can actually build strength and capacity for you and your nervous system, and why there's treasure hidden in your triggers, and how polarity, which is paradox, especially the dance between masculine and feminine, how that's actually the charge that fuels creation itself. So if you've ever felt caught between opposites, overwhelmed by triggers, or tired of resisting what you don't want, this conversation will help you see that the very paradox that you're living in is where your true power lives. So let's dive in. Now, welcome, Dr. Pat.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I love this topic. And I love it that you're talking about it now, because I think it's so relevant to what so many people are experiencing in the world.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to say that, well, first off, I realized just today that the last time I had you on was also at an equinox. And right before, it was in a month of an equinox.
Yep.
And at the time, we were talking more about using an equinox to leverage and balance energy and all that. But the reason I chose this theme for this month, and it's actually the theme for my whole Flourish membership this month, is because it was inspired by the equinox. I was using it as inspiration just for the theme for the entire month. And that was, of course, before we saw so much paradox in the world over the last week and a half. And so, it felt cosmically aligned to talk about it this month. And I feel like now more than ever, because it's really easy to allow paradox to pull you out of your power if you don't understand how to use it, right? And to find your center in all of it. So that was really the inspiration for it. And then, like I said, I realized as I was sitting down today to get ready for this, I'm like, the last time I had her on was before the equinox. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I'll tell you how I feel about it. I think it's great. I think that for me personally, it's these life changes, or dare I say, transformations that go on. I mean, this morning, silly story, but sitting out there and I've just been on my way to healing from something here recently. And so today was one of the first days that Linda and I got to sit in the front room again and have our coffee or whatever it was. And what I was struck by is I'm sitting in my chair and I don't usually get hit by the sunrise. Right? Now, why today? Well, I said, I look, and to Linda, this is like, who cares really at some level, right? So I said, did you notice all of a sudden the sun has moved what looks like from where I sit in the sky about a foot? And I said, it came up a foot to the right. Now, I'm using a foot from my sight.
Yeah.
But now the sun is so far to the left, it's coming up and it's hitting me right in the face. And I said, that's a sign of the change, as we come into the equinox. Now, I have to tell you, I'm acutely aware of this equinox because, my best friend's birthday, of course, is the 20th of September.
Okay.
So I'm always more aware of this one than I would be others. But it's fascinating because I have friends who have birthdays on or about on the equinox moments.
Wow.
But this one is extraordinary, I think, in a lot of ways. What was it about you, though? What made you think about this? Because growing up, this time of year was not pleasant for me as a kid. You
Mm,
know, it was go back to boarding school. It was
mhm.
associated with things not so great. And
Yeah.
yet it's the most beautiful times of the year in certain parts of the country, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I grew up in Ohio, and so I grew up with all four seasons, and I love it. There were moments I would move to the South for sure, but I also love the North. But there's something about living in the middle of it all where you get to experience all of it. And there's four different paradoxes right there, right? that that you get to. Well, I guess technically two paradoxes, right? Um, but yeah, there's this interesting that's like a well, it's tension that gets created between the two paradoxes. There's this energy that rises up between paradoxes. And when you look at it from the world, the earth perspective, it's like nature has its way of moving into perfect balance and then coming out of perfect balance slowly
Right?
over time, but then it always comes back again.
Yeah.
And there is tension that comes up and then it dissipates, and then tension that comes up and then dissipates, and it's this rhythm and flow of life, honestly. And this topic of tension is something that is so important to me because I realized a couple of years ago, I think I was studying some of the work of Robert Fritz, where he talked about this topic of tension, and I realized I'd been looking at it completely the wrong way, because I saw tension as like a bad thing, right?
Right.
In fact, there's that famous quote, intention, attention, no tension, right? I'm not sure. I think it may have been Jack Canfield who said that. And not to diss him, but I think what he really means is resistance, no resistance, right? Because there's a difference between tension and resistance.
There's a big difference.
Big
There's
difference.
actually a big difference. There are some people, and I'm one of them, I believe, that say resistance is one of those things that happens when we push against a certain reality.
Exactly.
But it's also the kind of thing that some people believe is necessary to get to flow or
Right.
flourish.
Yeah.
Now, that could be debated 100 ways upside down and
Yeah.
sideways. But
Yep.
when you think about it as negative, that's where you get into really quotes that don't make sense.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And they may not be as catchy, right? It's not as catchy sounding, but it's like really understanding the difference between those two energies. Like resistance, it's interesting when you think of resistance and like resistance training, that would be resistance coming from the outside.
Yeah,
In the gym, when you get resistance from the outside, you get stronger. But when
yeah.
you have resistance from the inside, you weaken yourself.
It's fascinating. I work with two clients. One of them, a corporate client. Let me just give you a backdrop so people get this and bring this into their reality real quick. You know, imagine I'm working with, I'm going to make up a name. I'm working with Mary,
Mhm.
right? I love Mary. A corporate executive, and she keeps saying yes to everyone and every project. Yes. Like
Mm,
it doesn't matter. Like the boss is not even done with saying the project, and Mary's got like yes. Why?
yeah.
Because Mary is afraid of letting
Yeah.
people down.
Yeah.
So here we go. Her body shows signs of what? Stress. But
Yep.
she keeps resisting, slowing down. See, now this is another use of the word resisting. See,
Exactly.
we can resist difficult things, but she resisted slowing down. She was clinging on to a belief that if you work hard, it equals worth. And I got to tell you, I related to this client because that was my story for the first part of my career. But the more she resisted rest,
Yep.
just like I've done in the past 2 weeks, the more she burns out, just like what happened to me.
Mm,
And it shows up in different ways. I worked with an artist client once who was stuck in, do we dare say it? Fear.
mm,
Now, people don't see fear as causing resistance, but
yeah.
Davina was her name, and not for real, but I'm making that up. She was a very talented painter. I loved the artwork. Could never afford them. Hello, couldn't buy them. But she delayed finishing work. And I kept asking her about this one piece. I was like, how you coming with the piece? And it was like, I'm so excited about it. I've been waiting all my life, that dialogue. But she resisted submitting the portfolio because she didn't want to get it rejected. So she had continued to not finish.
Yeah.
And instead of painting from joy, painted to prove herself and blocked total creativity. And see, that
Exactly.
we can all
Yeah.
relate to, right? I have
Yeah.
been accused recently of being in the same boat with our new launch. Now, there's a fine line between resisting because you're afraid to show your portfolio versus resisting because you don't want to launch a network software update and have it fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
But everyone goes through this,
Yeah.
Beth. Everyone does.
Exactly. Well, and this is exactly where understanding the difference between resistance and intention, I think, is so important because, the resistance that what you were describing with the first person is it's a fawning response, right? It's one of the nervous system responses. It's a reaction, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So if you're people pleasing, not wanting to let somebody down, not wanting to disappoint, that's going to be actually a fear response. And so you put the brakes on, and I always call it a stopping strategy. It's the way you stop yourself from moving forward. But if you can actually start to reframe when those things come up and you can feel the tension that rises because you're actually being given an opportunity by the universe to actually step into showing up in a different way, right? Engaging the circumstance or the situation in a different way. And maybe actually saying no to something that you really want to say yes to, or risk disappointing someone, right? Then you can actually step into and grow and experience something different. And that's the importance of understanding the two. When we put the brakes on and we employ the stopping strategy, we're resisting the growth. But when we can actually sit with the tension and what we are making it mean and what it might possibly mean about ourselves, or about what's possible, and learn to respond from a regulated nervous system, you give yourself the chance to grow and
Yeah.
evolve and create something different,
Yeah.
a different outcome.
There is a sport, and I'm not going to mention basketball because I am watching the women's basketball playoffs right now. And if I had to give an example of resistance and flow,
Mm-hmm.
because I do believe there are two sides to the same coin, and I
Mm-hmm.
get debated about this all the time from people. But we live in a world where I can have that opinion.
Yeah.
But if you watch the game last night between resistance and flow and watch the Valkyries just not able to hold on to a 17-point lead. And you watch these two teams. The first part was all about flow for the Valkyries, right? The second part was all about resistance.
Mm.
And, when you look at that, you have to think for a moment. I didn't think about it. If I wasn't doing the show today and I wasn't preparing, I wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah.
But you take somebody like a Serena Williams
Mm.
and you put Serena on the tennis court and you watch her at her best, not overthinking. Her mind, her body, her spirit, they're all synchronized, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
She trusts her training. She adapts to the moment. But does this mean that she didn't have to go through resistance to get there?
Right.
What do you think?
I love that you're bringing up sports because it's actually probably my favorite analogy or metaphor. I always confuse the two.
I don't know
But
why it's on my mind because
I,
I'm a little hungry to play my sport because I've been recovering. But
yeah.
I watched the women basketball team and I've watched now several energies. One, a
Yeah.
team like New York Liberty just not be able to play last night. And
Yeah.
you could clearly see the way they played was all about resistance. And, you can see it if you look for it, but we don't
Yeah.
look for this. So therefore, because we don't look for it, we don't know what to do.
Well, the interesting thing in sports is that the top players, the reason that they can work with tension, not resistance, is because they actually have such incredible focus.
Yeah.
they know where they're headed and they lock in on it and they don't get distracted by the things going on around them or looking behind them at, in this analogy, looking back at the past, right? And they can use tension in a different way. So I know you're talking maybe like a tension or resistance in terms of their mindset, but tension, I'm talking about when we understand intuitively, just as human beings, that
Exactly.
tension creates momentum. Look at
Exactly.
every single sport out there, there's a pullback, right? It's like whether you're playing soccer and you're pulling back your leg in order to get some momentum behind it before you kick it, or you're a baseball pitcher or a batter, it doesn't matter. Like intuitively, we understand when you pull back, you're creating some momentum. Well, there's tension that's pulling up in that. And as long as you keep your focus on where you're going, then you can actually leverage that tension. So
Yeah.
when we think about it that way in relationship to our life, right? When tension starts to build up, it's because there's a pullback happening, but you're being given an opportunity to get some momentum. And as long as you keep your focus on where you're going,
Bingo.
you can take your actions and you've got tons of energy behind you.
Yeah, but I know we're going to go to break, but I want to ask you this because I love that we're saying there's one sport that I've learned about that does all three. And you have to do all three to do it perfectly.
Okay.
And I can wait till break to tell you what that is. But there is one sport that does all three simultaneously in a
Ah,
single movement.
okay, now I'm dying to know. So we will talk about this as soon as we come back for sure. I want to know. I know we need to take a quick break here, but this is how our conversations tend to go, right? It's like the hour flies by, and you're like, "Give me more time back." Before we go to break for the listeners, I just love for you to pause and ask yourself, where in my life am I resisting, pushing against what I don't want? And where could I reframe it as a healthy tension that might actually be building my strength up? And just notice what comes up for you. The awareness alone is the first step towards reclaiming your power, because that tension, if you can be in the middle of it where you can observe it, that's actually where you gain your power back. That's the paradox that's happening. So we're going to take a short break. If you're loving this conversation and want to go deeper, join me inside the Flourish Alchemy membership, where we take these conversations beyond inspiration and into embodiment with monthly workshops, planning sessions, and somatic breathwork journeys to help you regulate your nervous system so you can release resistance and hold that tension. We'll see you back in a couple minutes. We are back at the Flourish Frequency show here with my beautiful guest, Dr. Pat. And we are
Yay!
here talking about this paradox and the resistance and the triggers the tension that come through paradox. And Dr. Pat, you were going to tell us about the sport.
Now, I will tell you there are multiple sports that I can talk about that come close to this. But the one that I'm talking about was growing up and learning because my coach told me I was too weak to play table tennis and that I had to do something. So I got myself the big fat Arnold Schwarzenegger encyclopedia of weight training.
Oh, okay.
Weight training is the one sport, and yes, I do consider it a sport,
Yeah.
that allows you to push the limits.
Yeah.
Push the limits of resistance. But you cannot weight train properly without flow. You understand that while you're pushing, there's tension.
Yeah.
The way you make those movements, if you ever watch Schwarzenegger in his young years talk about this and demonstrate it, when he picked up a weight, it was like dancing with the stars.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he would go on to say that there are some times where it's more difficult to lift the weight, and you have to know.
Yes.
You have to know when you've reached the point when the resistance is so great that you're never going to be able to flow and finish that movement, that you may need help. And it was such a great metaphor for me. I mean, if you watched anybody that trains, but weightlifters in particular, bodybuilders, let me call them,
Yeah.
They demonstrate in their final performance the epitome of flow, resistance, and
Mm.
tension.
Beautiful. Yeah. And you're actually making a point here for me is that, again, there is a difference, though, between resistance from the outside and resistance from the inside,
Yep.
right? It's
Yep.
like when we have resistance from the outside, we're being given the opportunity to get stronger. But when we resist from the inside against that, we don't go into that flow,
Yeah.
right? It's like we're resisting the tension, so we try and let go of it on the inside, and all you do is weaken yourself in the process.
Oh, yeah. And, I want to go back
Yeah.
to Schwarzenegger for a minute because while he was not my table tennis coach, the lessons I learned, because back then there wasn't a model for women to do
Mm-hmm.
this, there
Right.
wasn't. But I kind of followed him, and Schwarzenegger will tell you that, and you didn't put it in this word, so please correct me here. He would put it that, the mind. The
Yeah.
mind is the catalyst
Exactly.
between whether or not you finish that repetition or not.
Exactly.
And so it's one of the most fascinating sports to understand the complexity of the body and the mind and the spirit
Yeah.
in one single movement.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. There's one other point I wanted to make on this before we move on to the next topic, and that's, because we're using these sports analogies here, and I was saying before that, we create tension and we intuitively know it when we're playing sports. Our bodies know to pull back to create a tension that creates momentum. But what's interesting, and I just want to point this out to people, is that if you're using the same analogy here, is that the closer you are to the target. So, like, for example, in golf, or if you're playing pool, right? The closer you are, the less you have to pull back.
Oh, yeah. In
You
my
still
sport,
have,
too.
yeah, you're still laser focused on the target, but you're so close that you're not having to pull back to gain any energy and momentum. It's like you're right there at that spot and you're just pushing into it. And I think that's another way to really understand how this energy of tension works in our life, too. It's really easy when you're super close to your goal, to your dream, to not have to pull back and create any tension there because you're already so close to it that it's about to happen. You just have to stay focused on it and keep taking your steps. But when you're further away from it, there's going to be more tension that's drawing up because you don't know how you're going to get there. And
Yeah.
that's what creates tension in our lives. And so being able to like have that kind of unknown tension and being able to pull back and hang in the tension and let it build the energy is so important.
Yeah.
And so this next topic here, this next part of this is really being able to find treasure in our triggers, right? So when that tension's happening, we're getting triggered. It's triggering all the stuff within about why it can't happen, or the stories of why I'm not good enough or smart enough or pretty enough, or whatever it is. Those are the fears that are triggering something within us, and it's pulling it up to the surface so that we can actually deal with it. But most people, we're taught to avoid what feels bad, right? We're taught um, to fix it and see it as a problem or stuff it down and just avoid it altogether. Meanwhile, again, that's where the energy is building, and that's where we have the opportunity to actually let it go so that we can let go, right? So we can move forward. So, I'm curious how you feel about that, and
Yeah.
maybe have you noticed in your own life where that's happened
Oh,
before?
there's no question about it. I'll tell you where it starts. I'm going to give you one example. I'll tell you where it starts. It starts usually for me, and I know this was true for Oprah, that
Mm,
it starts at the place where there's this universal God calling.
yeah.
So I don't know what was in Oprah's mind, but I'll tell you what she did and I'll tell you what she struggled with, because I struggled with the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So here she is, and she's got her own show back in the day, and she seems to be doing well, but not well enough. It's not the dream. But
Mm,
she's interviewing all of these people, and they are gut-wrenching stories. I mean, you know that when
right.
you go back to early Oprah, right? And then you see
Yeah.
her evolve. So what's the problem? The problem is she resisted talking openly
Mm,
about her own traumas and background. She wanted to be seen as a professional and
yeah.
neutral, just like me. I will tell you, both of us gave up that ship.
Yeah.
But she didn't want to be seen as vulnerable. But
Yeah.
once she leaned into leaned into the resistance, you feel what
Yes.
I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Once she leaned into that and shared her authentic story, it unlocked her flow. See,
Yes.
I think resistant points to the threshold of transformation.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it gets you there, but it gives you that opportunity. And it not just unlocked her flow, but it unlocked her flow as a media powerhouse. Her
Yeah.
vulnerability became the channel for her influence, you see?
Yeah. 100%. This is why I always say the treasures or the triggers hold the keys to the treasure. Right.
That's right.
And if you take that key and you lean in, you put it into the lock and you turn it, you unlock that treasure that's right there. That,
Yeah.
what's the famous saying? You turn your pain into your power or purpose, right? It's the same thing. You're talking about like the very thing we want to avoid, and we resist is the very thing that actually will catapult you forward if you actually lean into it. And what happens when you lean into it is it dissolves, right? It's you alchemize it. You turn
Yeah.
it into something more powerful than if you were trying to resist it. And I think, this whole topic today is about paradox, right? It's about the power in the paradox is not in leaning to one side or the other. It's being able to be in the middle where you can handle the possibilities of both. And you can, because if you can't handle it, you're not able to hold it. And so if you
You're
want
not.
more in your life, which is what my business is all about, is helping people have more in their lives, you've got to be able to handle all of it. And if you can't
Yeah.
handle all of it, if you can't handle more, you can't have more.
And 9 times out of 10, we can't handle it alone. See,
Right.
that's what I have found about my own journey is that there are some things that I could not handle alone, but I'm quick to go get a coach. I have multiple coaches. I'm quick to go get a spiritual teacher, to go out in the desert. There are three key things that I've learned from Paradox.
Yeah.
One is that I do believe resistance does point to the threshold of transformation. I
Yes.
do believe that. The second, though, is flow, is what happens on the other side
Yes.
once we surrender.
Yes.
Now, or learn or act with courage. Now, part of that that's unsaid is that for me, there has to be an unwavering trust
Yeah.
in a power greater than myself or the universe or even myself. And then the paradox of all this is that sometimes you do need resistance as the
Yeah.
compass towards flow,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially if you want to grow.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're familiar with Gene Keys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but the very first pathway in Gene Keys is between your life's work and your evolution. It's called the pathway of challenge, right? And it's part of like the hero's journey if you think about it, right? It's like there's always that challenge that's there that's challenging you to grow. It's not challenging you to take you down, it's challenging you to grow. And that's really what paradox will do for you is it's going to challenge you to that next level. And so I think you're right, it's a compass. When that resistance is coming up, you're being challenged to again to engage it differently, to show up differently, and to lean into the gift instead of the shadow frequency, right? And the only reason we don't grow is because we stay down in the shadow frequency. So it's like I can't handle the light,
Yeah.
so I'm going to stay in the shadow, which means no growth, no power.
Exactly. Exactly. And what I've experienced with myself over these past couple of years has been fascinating
Mhm.
because um, I didn't see COVID as the showstopper.
Right.
I don't know how,
Yeah.
but I saw it as this opportunity to redo all of the software and
Yeah.
things like that. I also learned from 2009 and 10 when we went through the greatest economic downturn,
Yeah.
and my show was more popular than ever. And that's when TTR was formed. It
Yeah.
wasn't formed because I had nothing better to do. It was formed because every day,
Yeah.
14 hours a day, I'm on air, AM, FM radio, and beyond. And what I heard from the listeners, it was gut wrenching, and it was a trigger for me to hear those
Yeah.
stories that's so like my life and then not do anything about it. And the way the transformation network idea came up out of resistance. It came up out of a bad check written by my buddy Greg, and Chris DiPaolo screaming at me that I needed to send him a check for $2,200. And I want to tell you, if I would have resisted in that moment,
Yeah.
when I got Chris, my God, I miss him so much. He passed away very unexpectedly. If it wasn't for Chris DiPaolo and WBLQ, we would not exist today.
Yeah.
But there was a moment in time where Chris was, Baccili, you need to send me a check for $2,200 right now, and you need to start a network. This
Yeah.
guy was your friend,
Yeah.
right? I
Oof.
had a moment.
Yeah.
Do I write the check or not? And I had no idea how to create this. And I said to Chris, I'll send you a check tomorrow. And the rest is history. And Chris
Beautiful.
DiPaolo on WBLQ in the middle of crazy car commercials would play oming and mantras for some of our hosts back then.
Wow.
And and so that's a moment.
Yeah.
See, you've got to know what to do in that moment, and you've got to trust that that little deal that came up in the middle of the worst economic downturn I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah. Yep. This is why two people will experience the exact same circumstance in completely different ways, and you're actually referring to something even that, like, if you look at it from the high performance side of things, you'd say it's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? It's like the ability to see opportunity where other people are seeing obstacle. Like that alone is something that allows you to work with tension and move forward from it. It's because you were actually, I'll go back to Robert Fritz's work again too,
Yeah.
right? It's the difference between being creative and problem solving. Instead of looking at like a problem and getting hooked into problem, you actually focused and created something new that actually made the problem go away in the process, right?
Yeah. But look at the universe, how it shows up. And I want to drive this point home. The
Mm-hmm.
universe shows up for all of us. But
Exactly.
how do we learn to recognize it? How do we learn to see it? And the events that followed that were all about flow. The minute I surrendered into that $2,200 check, I wrote a job post on Put It on Freelancer, and it was the most ridiculous job post you could ever read. And Oliver from Germany showed up and said, I can do it all, including building software that runs our network today. And I'm going back to 2009.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'll run it for you from Germany with Chris.
Yeah.
You can't plan that, but see, isn't that what you do
Yeah.
when you talk about flourish?
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about here? We're talking about how you can move through and navigate
Yeah.
sometimes the rockiest of waves.
Yeah, because
Because
they may
somehow,
appear to be rough, but that there's
exactly.
something more beautiful underneath it, right? And it's kind of interesting because what you're also referring to. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about like lower limits, right? With Gay Hendricks' work with the Big Leap, where he talks about lower limits, or Maxwell Maltz with psycho-cybernetics, right? The lower limits. What's interesting is you got that lower limit raised because you got the fire lit under you by the $2,200 check or whatever, right? It's like it forced you to raise your lower limit and say, I'm actually not settling for what I've been made available for. And again, you raised it in the process. And now look what's come out of it. Like something
Well,
just amazing.
Well, isn't it a perfect example of how polarities are not enemies? So let's talk
Exactly.
about that. Chris and I, at some level, we're both from the East Coast, but our platform in the world was extremely difficult
Yeah.
and different. We were very different. Here I started something that didn't exist in the world, myself and four other women, right? I give those four other women credit for doing talk radio in this way and then coming out of the world. And then Chris is running WBLQ with car ads and just a total and and somehow we say yes to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to be enemies.
Yeah. And you found flow and paradox. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's how you
The only problem we ever had was when the guests, the hosts, people like you, right? In the middle of their show, we'd hear this crazy commercial for cars.
that makes no sense.
But it was what I agreed to.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
it didn't stop us though.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, look at what you've accomplished and what's been created out of it. It's absolutely beautiful.
I
So,
am guided by spirit every minute of every day. And
yeah.
when I listen, I'm good. When I don't listen, it's so ugly. I can't, you know what it's like? It's so ugly. It's like burnt pork chops. There's nothing uglier than a burnt pork chop, right? I
Yes.
mean, that's just one analogy, but but that's the sense of it.
Yeah.
When I can find the courage and trust
Yeah.
and make the decision that I need to make.
Yeah.
But isn't that decision point a part of
It,
tension?
absolutely. Absolutely. And it enables you to hold both faith and fear at the same time, right?
Oh
Paradox.
boy.
That's the power in the middle of it, is I can hold both at the same time and I can move forward.
Yeah. But
So,
don't you, let me ask you a question because this is, I know we got a few minutes left here, but this is a really important conversation.
yeah.
I had to look back in preparing for the show at the times where I've been derailed,
Yeah.
right? Or better yet, derailed myself. And I think back despite making, despite not believing,
Mm.
I got into a graduate program that I never thought I'd get into. I had to wait a year. I was rejected by 35 schools. Claremont was my first school, but I was told to send out applications. And I was put on a waiting list. And when I didn't get in, and they sent a letter to Linda that I was on the waiting list because I had moved from the East Coast and I wasn't really settled here. Um, Linda was like, "You're going to get in." And I was like, that's ridiculous. I never heard of a waiting list. What do I got? And I'm not going to go into what I said because it was really a lot of foul language. But I basically said, that's just never going to happen.
Mm.
But you see, I had to borrow her faith.
Yes, that's a great point.
I had to borrow her faith
Yeah.
because she sat on that. And as a matter of fact, she sent the letter back for me.
Yeah.
And I sat in Seattle. And one day I got a call.
Wow.
Come down to Claremont, Dr. Carolyn Granrose. Come on down to Claremont. I'm like, okay, I thought
Yeah.
you people rejected me. No, we
Yeah.
put you on a waiting list. If you don't understand that, maybe we made a mistake.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Granrose became my friend, my colleague. We published together. That one decision for Linda to have faith in me when I didn't have it in myself,
Yeah.
that's part of the journey too.
Yeah. You're hitting on something so key here. So much of this work we talk about here is like building capacity, right? To be able to handle more. But there's inner capacity and there's outer capacity. And part of outer capacity is getting the people to lean into, right? So that could be a coach or a mentor or a friend, or it could look like, if you're trying to expand in your business, it could look like hiring additional support. Or, I've had capacity, I've mentioned to you before, both my parents have dementia, and it's been a health journey, quite
Yeah,
honestly, with both of them, and navigating that. And there's an inner capacity that I've needed to build to be able to handle, the sad and the sweet at the same time, being able to hold both so that the sad doesn't rob me of the sweet, right? That's inner capacity, but I've also had to have outer capacity and hire additional people to help support. So I wasn't trying to navigate it all by myself. And I also, from that experience, I also realized, oh, I get to do the same thing in my business, right? I get to develop the inner capacity so that I can actually handle the ups and downs of business, but I also get to hire people to support me so that I can allow my business to actually grow. And that's can be applied to all areas of life. Every single area of life. What you just described as an outer capacity. You didn't have the faith in yourself in that moment. So maybe your inner capacity wasn't totally there, but you were smart enough to lean into somebody else's faith and borrow it. And that's a beautiful example of outer capacity too. And now
yeah.
look at you.
Well, and I'll tell you, I mean, when I did that, I didn't know how that would turn out. I didn't quite understand how much faith Linda did have in that me in that process and how
Yeah.
much belief she had. But by letting go of that, I spent the next year in Seattle riding my Harley Davidson, having coffee and walking my collie and learning how to line dance and two-step, right?
Oh, so much
And
fun.
so that year,
Yeah.
which people would call wait list, I
Mm,
was on a waiting list. that year was exactly what I needed coming off of a 25-year career, then going a year of graduate school at Columbia, then moving to Seattle, think I was going to go to school here. That year was such a gift.
Yeah.
Isn't that the paradox we're talking about?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know we're supposed to take a break here, but it's like you keep tying into stuff here. It's like it's the paradox that happens when you hit burnout, right?
Oh,
Like
God.
again, there's a gift in the burnout if you allow yourself to rest, recuperate, and
Yeah.
relax and build your inner capacity again. Then you get
You
to
have to do
pull the
it.
wisdom from the burnout, right?
You have to do it. And
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I'm not very good at it when it comes to where I am with the network and what we're launching. I mean, by all reality, given the past 2 weeks of me moving through COVID, I
Mm,
should have shut everything down and gone to bed.
yeah.
And what a lesson I learned from that. And it wasn't until I think 4 or 5 days into it where I didn't have the resistance anymore.
Mm,
Where I just, no matter what I did, when I'm talking to a client and my eyes are starting to shut, that's an indication that you should be in bed. And once that happened to me, I wasn't able to do it all,
yeah.
but I was able to back off. And I had Linda cancel a bunch of things for me, which I hate doing with clients. And I just had her cancel them and said, look, I'm good till about 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now, remind you, I get up at 5.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
good till about 1. But I tried to get through
Yeah.
the
Power
whole
through.
day.
It doesn't work like that.
The body
That's
was
a
like,
resistance, right? That's resisting it and trying to power through it. Doesn't work like that.
it doesn't work like that. And, to go back to the sports analogy, and I love what you brought up about the distance. I tried to think of a sport where that wasn't true since we were using sports.
Hmm.
And I thought about this and I said, I can't think of a sport, not even NASCAR. Like my uncle was a NASCAR pit guy, right? But even in racing, those formula cars,
Yeah.
it's all about resistance and distance.
Yeah.
You see, I used to motorcycle race around a track. And I will tell you that when you're up against the curve and you're tight into the rail,
Yeah.
it is less resistance, right?
You lean into the curve.
When you're leaning into the curve.
Yeah.
If you're trying to pass somebody on the curve, you have to come out
Hmm.
and control of the bike,
Yeah.
to do that is so much harder. It takes extraordinary skill. And then in
Yeah.
my own sport, I happen to be a looper. I happen to play like a man. I
Okay.
play table tennis like men, you see men. But I learned from a national champion. And here's what I learned, exactly what you said. When you're farther away from the table, you need a longer stroke. If you
Yep.
can take a longer stroke, you can put more spin on the ball. But when you're close at the table, your most powerful kill shot has less movement. And if you look at so
Exactly.
much in what we do in the world, that is true for so many things in life.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh. All right, quick break, right? So I'm gonna pose this to the listeners here. I'd love for you guys to reflect on this. That remember your triggers aren't problems to solve. They are paradoxical portals. Okay. They hold both pain and possibility at once. So I'd love to invite you to reflect on this. Where might you be having triggers showing up for you in your life? When you feel that charge, do you automatically try to fix it or avoid it? And if you leaned into it instead, what wisdom or treasure might actually be waiting for you there? Just notice what arises for you. Sometimes, oftentimes, the very thing that you're resisting is the portal to your next level of power. So we'll take another quick break here and we will be right back to wrap it up. We are back, and this hour has gone way too fast. I had a whole other segment here that I wanted to talk about, but honestly, I'm just going to dive into this really quick and just leave it in the listener's mind here. It's the topic of, the law of polarity, which tells us that opposites aren't enemies. They're simply two sides or two ends of the same spectrum. Hot and cold are both temperature, light and dark are both expressions of the same field. And here's one that's really powerful for everyone to really just sit with here: masculine and feminine. They are the clearest examples of this. You've got structure and flow, logic and intuition. Both are necessary. And here's where tension comes back in, because creation itself requires polarity, polarity that generates tension. If you think about it, life itself is created through sexual tension, the meeting of opposites that come together in a dynamic charge. Without that tension, there is no spark. And without the spark, there's no creation. And when we collapse into just one side, we lose power. But when we can hold both, the masculine and the feminine, action and rest, right? We can access the charge that fuels creativity, that fuels vitality, and that fuels flourishing. And so, here I'd invite the listeners to think about this. We're not talking man and woman here. We're talking masculine and feminine energies within your life. And when one gets too far out of balance, because we're avoiding the other, right? Or we're using it to compensate, we actually are losing power. A lot of times, the perfect example for me is when high achievers do end up in burnout. It's because they're so heavy in the masculine energy that they haven't allowed for the feminine, or they see the feminine as a negative, right? That it's going to mean they're too soft or too weak. And the opposite can be true as well. When you're too far in the feminine and you're not engaging the masculine at all, then you can be in those spaces of rest and flow and all that, but then nothing ever happens. Nothing ever gets off the ground, right? It's being able to be in that space where you can be in the middle, that it's not about having a perfect balance, but when you're in the middle, you can see when you can flow from one into the other, right? And that is flow, right? Being able to lean into one and then use it to support the other, lean into the other and use it to support the other, right? And that's what creates something powerful for you. So, I would invite the listeners again here. We have just a couple of minutes here. So I want to really drive this home. Paradox is not conflict. It's charge that fuels creation. Tension, when held and not resisted, like we talked about earlier, becomes the spark that births new possibilities. So what do you want to create in your life? As we close, I'd love to have to leave you with a couple of thoughts here. Resistance is what drains your energy, but tension is what can build it. Your triggers aren't here to punish you. They hold paradoxical treasure. And polarity isn't conflict, it's the charge that fuels creation. So if you don't look at paradox as a problem, if you don't try and collapse into one side or the other, and you can stand in that space where you can hold both, you can choose where to put your focus, energy, and attention. And that's important, right? We have to have focus. But if you're in a space where you're reacting to things in your life, you're not in power. You're losing power. And then there is nothing new that gets created out of that. And Dr. Pat, I think you've had some really great examples here today of what that looks like for you in your own life and how you've been able to use your triggers to create treasure. And we wouldn't be here today if you hadn't done that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say one comment, and thank you for ending the show on that note.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now are more and more demonstration of masculine and feminine playing out and blowing the minds. And I really want to point to something. Whatever you think about Caitlin Clark and basketball, I want to just say one thing. Women's basketball is blowing the doors and rewriting the narrative. And if there was ever a sport that demonstrated both masculine and feminine, when these women play on the court, you're getting all of that masculine. When you see them off the court and what they do in the world, you're seeing them in their feminine plus states.
Yeah.
And so they have confused, not themselves, but they've changed the landscape of things.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great example. I hadn't even thought about that. That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
for the audience, if you are ready to take these conversations deeper, not just listening, but practicing and embodying and integrating them into your everyday life, then I would love to invite you to join me inside the Flourish Alchemy membership. It's where we gather every month. We have a monthly forecast, focus, and flow planning session where we actually work with paradox. We work with structure to support flow. We have a monthly meta mastery conversation where we take this topic and we go deeper into some embodiment exercises. And then we have a monthly somatic magic breathwork journey, which helps support you in regulating your nervous system so that you can flourish from the inside out. You can find all the details at BethLarsenCoaching.com. That's Larsen. And I'd love to have you welcome you into the community. So thank you, Dr. Pat, for sharing your wisdom.
It was awesome.
Experience. And to our listeners, keep expanding, keep evolving, and keep flourishing. Thank you for tuning in to the Flourish Frequency Show with me, Beth Larsen. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and are leaving with a heart full of inspiration and a mind buzzing with the possibilities of more. Tune in every third Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio for more frequency boosting conversations. And if you want more help getting into your flourish flow and stepping into the possibilities of more, you can find me at BethLarsenCoaching.com. That's BethLarsenCoaching.com, Larsen with an E.